are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast, tracking the storm that is the Miami Hurricanes. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Also, subscribe to the podcast on all platforms, as well as this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Today, I've got Alex Donno joining me, and we're going to talk a little Miami Hurricanes football. I don't know if either of us have recovered from what happened on Friday night between the Canes and the Hokies, but we're going to talk a little bit about that game, which may go down as one of the classics in this program's history, and then kind of look ahead to what needs to be fixed with this Miami Hurricanes football team to continue this 5-0 undefeated run so far. Thanks for joining me today, Alex.
It's my pleasure, Marcus. And yeah, I'm barely recovered. I had several panic attacks during that game, especially in the fourth quarter. In fact, during that replay process alone on that final play, the replay was about, I think it was 7 minutes. They were looking at that. My entire life flashed before my eyes about 7 times. It was just unbelievable drama. And I'm happy that they ultimately, I strongly feel that they got the call right. I know a lot of people are upset about it, whether they be just Miami haters or just people who understandably wanted to see the underdog win in dramatic, because I get that. If you're watching it as if you don't have allegiance to either team, it would be a great story for the huge underdog to defeat, number 7 at the time on the road. I get it, but man, I thought they ultimately got the call right. And I don't know if I've ever felt that relieved in my entire life.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like they got the call right as well. Most people may call us homers in that respect, but if you're looking at it just from a football perspective, the Virginia Tech player never had possession of the ball, and I was flabbergasted to see the refs call it a touchdown. The fact that they called it a touchdown, I feel like made it more controversial than it really needed to be. And I'm glad they got the call right as well, because Alex, I was saying this on my instant reaction video, that say if they did call it against the Hurricanes and they scored on that play, oh my God, that would have been totally demoralizing for this team. And just to lose to an unranked rival at home on the final play, that would totally rip this team's heart out. And I would be concerned of their psyche kind of going forward if that call is not reversed. But like you said, there were a lot of fans and just kind of a lot of people, I would call them haters as well, Donno, that thought the call was wrong, which was, I think because it was called a touchdown, I think many was like, okay, well, there's not inconclusive evidence. But the inconclusive evidence was on the video. I mean, you could see clearly that it wasn't a touchdown, never had possession. The only possession that was actually secured was by 43, who was Isaiah Horton, who was on the ground out of bounds, which was an incomplete pass. So the drama of it all is something that I'll definitely remember from Friday night for sure. But on to the next one, right? And we kind of want to see a lot of improvements from what we saw. And one, I think, for the first time, Donno, is with Cam Ward. Cam Ward, let's be honest, put his team in danger on Friday night with 3 turnovers. He was also sacked 3 times as well, which, of course, can be on Cam. It could be on the offensive line as well. So those were kind of the main issues on offense. But going into the season, Donno, you kind of thought that, okay, well, this is what you kind of get with Cam Ward based on the statistics that we've seen from him in the past couple of years. Anywhere from about 30 to 40 sacks, and maybe close to around 70 sacks taken in the past, 2 years, which is a ton. Obviously, he's playing against a better offensive line. But like you mentioned in your After the Storm piece on CanesCounty.com, this is kind of what you get with Cam Ward. So should we be concerned going forward? And is this type of play from Ward sustainable?
Yeah, I referred to it as the full Cam Ward experience because you got all the good with all of the bad. And at the end of the game, the good outweighed the bad. So we don't really and obviously this is something that you and I can dwell on talking about the mistakes that were made. But overall, I still thought Ward managed to raise his Heisman stock despite committing 3 turnovers because he was so brilliant at the end of that game to lead the comeback that he still comes away, looking, better and probably having higher stock than he did before. But at the same time, like you talked about it, like he did put his team at risk. And I think some of that is inevitable when you've got a gunslinger mentality. Like when you see the types of plays that Ward, the brilliant plays that he makes throughout games, to make brilliant plays, you have to take big chances sometimes. And then sometimes if you're just a second off with your timing, if you're off with your read, you're going to throw some interceptions sometimes when you take as many shots downfield as Ward does. But what makes me feel good about Ward, Marcus, and why I don't think that what we saw from him in the not so good is going to be a regular thing down the road is he's such a student of the game. Every time he makes a mistake, he learns from it. I strongly believe that. And that goes back to the first interception that he threw this year against Florida. He went right to the iPad and made sure he didn't make that same mistake again. I think there are definitely some teachable moments for Ward. In fact, I thought that he learned throughout that game because he was at his sharpest when he needed to be in the fourth quarter. Ward was not making mistakes. He was doing the opposite of that. Like we're watching the amazing improvisation play that Ward made where he was almost sacked twice. He flips it out to Riley Williams, and kudos to Riley because he got way more than the first down that he needed. He rumbled down to the 2-yard line with the stiff arm. That was incredible. But Ward started making plays like that. The throw to Xavier Restrepo when Restrepo was on his butt, which was obviously an incredible catch, but also a clutch throw by Ward. When Ward had to pick up that snap like from the dirt, that was a play that could have ended up in a turnover that he was able to corral that ball, hand it off to Damian Martinez for a positive gain. Ward was so poised in the fourth quarter that, and the other thing about it, Marcus, is at some point, I don't know if it's this week or the week after that or the week after the bye week, at some point, Jalen Rivers is going to be back, your anchor starting left tackle. And I think that's only going to fortify your offensive line. So, yeah, you may get some moments where Ward makes mistakes. He's not at his best, but I think the positives with him are going to far outweigh the negatives.
Yeah, I agree. 100% because of, a win's a win. And without Cam Ward, you don't win that game based on that play that we saw. Of course, without that unbelievable catch by Xavier Restrepo, you don't win that game. But of course, it was thrown by Ward as well on that fourth down. So, yeah, you kind of take the good with the bad with him for now, but you do want to see him not turn the ball over 3 times. Let's just say that. I mean, because if he doesn't turn the ball over 3 times, especially that one in the end zone, I don't think this game is as close as it was at all. And we don't almost have a heart attack at the end of the game with that Hail Mary.
And you think about that interception that he threw in the end zone, in the red zone, that ended up being a 14-point swing because on the previous play, he'd thrown a touchdown pass that they overruled for a very questionable holding call on Markel Bell. I thought the guy fell awkwardly, so they threw the holding flag. And then, the interception came on the next play. And then 2 plays later, Virginia Tech scored. So that ended up, you went from what you thought was 21-7 to 14-14 in the snap of a finger. Yeah,
absolutely. I thought it was a phantom holding call for sure.
Yeah.
And it really kind of changed the whole complexity of the game. It was a great play by Ward to find George, in the corner of the end zone and to have that taken off the board. And then interception next play was absolutely backbreaking for the Hurricanes. But they were able to recover, like we said, behind the arm and legs of Cam Ward. I do want to point out there were some key runs that he made, including a touchdown run in the fourth that really kind of helped this team get back in this game and eventually win. Let's go to the other side of the ball, though, Dono, because for the first time, the Canes did look vulnerable, defensively. There was a lot of missed tackles, over 20 missed tackles in this game, very uncharacteristic of this team this season. Kiko Mauanoa probably had his worst game as a Miami Hurricane from what we saw. And according to Pro Football Focus, go to canescounty.com for the full list of grades and snap counts for every player on offense and defense. Make sure you're a subscriber in order to see that story. Mish Powell also, I thought probably had his worst game as a Miami Hurricane as well. So what's your perception now kind of this defense, and what do you see that kind of needs to be fixed in order for them to continue this ACC championship run?
Yeah, I mean, this was the first game when a lot of the preseason concerns we had about the defensive secondary seemed to be confirmed. I thought that there were some soft coverages, too much ball watching, some blown coverages. So the secondary had held up earlier in the season, but a lot of that was against less talented quarterbacks and receivers, and also with a little bit more of a pass rush. Like Miami ended up with pretty decent stats in terms, I think they ended up with 6 tackles for loss and 2 sacks in the game, but it didn't feel like they were nearly as consistent, and they lost some guys to injury during the game. So it didn't feel like you had nearly as much consistent pressure. And also Kyron Drones, like for as many amazing plays as Cam Ward made, Drones had hit a handful of just unbelievable plays outside the pocket and kind of caught Miami's defensive secondary unawares. So there's definitely some stuff that I'm a little bit more concerned about with the defensive backs that, I have to wonder, hopefully, and I trust Lance Guidry to make adjustments and Chevis Jackson and company to coach up the players. So hopefully, but I think some of that maybe inexperience was exposed in this game in a way that it wasn't. So I don't know if this is as fixable, but in terms of the tackling, I've got to think that's fixable, Marcus. When you look at, you mentioned over 20 missed tackles. I believe there were 21 missed tackles in this game after they missed 22 combined tackles in the previous 4 games. That feels like an aberration to me to miss 21 tackles in this one game. And, you mentioned Kiko. I don't expect Kiko to play that poorly again this year. I don't expect Mish, who did get an interception in the game, but outside of that, I don't expect him to play that poorly again this year. So hopefully, sometimes you're going to have off nights. I mean, even the 2001 team had, a couple of off games. Boston College against Virginia Tech, they had a closer game than expected that year. So that sort of stuff is going to happen. So I'm hoping the tackling is fixable. In terms of the defensive secondary, I'm a little bit more concerned, but I don't know the injury statuses of all the guys who left the game on the defensive line, but we did hear on Monday morning, Mario Cristobal said it, and I know his injury information is not always 100% reliable, but
Right.
he did, in no uncertain terms, Cristobal said Ruben Bain is a go this week. So if Ruben Bain really is a go, and I don't think Cristobal would have said it if it wasn't true, because there was no room for interpretation on that. If Ruben Bain is a go this week, that's definitely going to help the defensive line create more consistent pressure this week. But I don't expect Miami's defense to play that poorly again, but that was ghastly throughout that game.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hopefully Ruben Bain does return this game. I can't 100% believe Mario Cristobal because he said Jalen Rivers was going to return 2 weeks ago, and he's still now it still hasn't returned as of yet from his injury. So I'm hopeful because I did see Ruben Bain doing full sprints before the game on Friday night from sideline to sideline. I want to say he sprinted full speed. I want to say about 10 times, just kind of back and forth. So it does give me hope that he indeed is going to play, and they're going to need that pressure in this next game because I feel like pressure was kind of missing in this game against Drones. I felt like they needed to blitz to get pressure, and that kind of opened up some holes in the defense. And Tech was able to kind of take advantage of those holes in the defense based on blitzing. So Miami definitely needs to clean up the tackling. I certainly think that is something that will happen for sure. And if Ruben Bain comes back, that'll, of course, only help things. Tyler Barron got banged up in this game. Simeon Barrow also got banged up in this game. So we'll see the status. Hopefully, we'll get some more clarity or some more hope from Cristobal today. We'll see how that kind of all plays out. But now Miami travels all the way to Cal for their next game. And obviously, it's their longest trip of the season. And Cal's a decent team. Cal, this is a team that beat Auburn on the road and played Florida State tough. So Cal is going to be a tough game. I think we've kind of learned from this last game that these conference games are going to be tough. They're not going to be easy. Especially this one on the road, I think is going to be. It's not going to be an easy game. I don't think. I think it's going to be close, especially in the first half. Maybe Miami kind of pulls away in the second if they, take care of the football and tackle. I think it's the two main things that really kind of need to be done here is tackling and not turning the football over. So when you look at this Cal trip, how, based on what you've seen so far this season, how do you see it playing out, Donno?
I think Cal has a defense that can make things really difficult and really muddy for you. When you talk about turnovers, I think it was like 5 turnovers that they created in their upset win on the road against Auburn. So that's the sort of thing that, if they're creating 4 or 5 turnovers against Miami, I think their defense might be too good for you to, come back the way that you did against Virginia Tech. But then on the flip side, Cal, we've already seen it this year from them. Like they are notorious. It's just the identity of that football team is, and this goes back even farther than Justin Wilcox, is Cal, you never know who's going to show up. Like they can play up and down to the level of competition. They can look like a top 10 team one week and then look like an FCS team the following week. Like you never know which version of Cal is going to show up. Now it's going to be a home ACC game for them, ACC after dark. So I'm sure, they're obviously Miami has the reputation of not having the best fan support in stadium. Cal has that, rightfully, that reputation as well. But I have a feeling College game day is going to be there. So I'm sure their stadium's going to be completely full. But they've got some players on their offense, Marcus, that could give Miami problems. If Miami still has trouble tackling, Cal's coming off a bye week. And, the guy who I looked at as their most talented offensive player who hasn't really lived up to that so far this year, but I think he's been playing hurt, is Jaden Ott, their star running back. But, he's had now an extra week off to heal from some of the injury issues that he had. So Ott may be finally at his best this year. And if you're having trouble tackling, that guy can roast you. Their quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, like he's not lighting up the stat sheet, but he's been playing pretty well. He's been playing efficiently. And this is a South Florida kid, Columbus, who I don't really think Miami recruited him. So he's going to be extra motivated playing this game against, the team from his hometown. So, if you can expect like sometimes, Marcus, and this happens a lot to Miami because Miami is basically the de facto national championship game for a lot of teams on their schedule. You just have to assume Cal is going to play their best game of the season this week. The same way you saw Virginia Tech played by far their best game of the season so far against Miami last week. I think you're going to get Cal's best shot this week. So as long as Miami doesn't play their worst game, because they played their worst game last week, I think the Hurricanes have the talent, too much talent to win this game, because I think Miami's defense maybe has an opportunity to kind of get right, because I don't know how Cal only scored 9 points against Florida State. That seems like an aberration compared to what other teams have been doing to the Seminoles this year. But this could definitely be a tough game. If Cal is at their best and Miami is at their worst, that team is going to beat you. And so I think, Marcus, if anything, it was probably a good thing that Virginia Tech performance just happened, because the odds of that happening 2 weeks in a row to me are pretty slim.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think you hit it right on the head when it comes to turnovers. California is number 3 in the nation in turnover margin. Okay, so that's something to definitely be concerned with. And I agree with you again about last week. The fact that turnovers were an issue in this game against Tech, I think, puts a heightened sense of awareness of how just critical just holding onto the football will be, for the next for the rest of the season. And yeah, Mendoza, I know his dad, I know the little brother as well. I've watched these kids grow up, basically from freshmen, and I'm so happy to see Mendoza, get that offer from Cal late, and for him to be starting and doing his thing over there in Berkeley is really nice to see. What I saw though from the Florida State game is that he was sacked about 6 or 7 times in that game. I think that's kind of the key there. And against Auburn, he was sacked just twice. So to me, that's kind of the difference in the game for me. I think if Miami is able to get pressure on Cal, then I think Miami can easily walk away with a victory. Of course, if they take care of the football. The other thing about Cal is that they're 84th in rushing offense. And Miami's kind of struggled a little bit when it comes to running the ball as well. So it seems like this is a game that's going to come down to third down conversions, which Miami's still number one in the nation at, by the way. But when it comes to third down conversions, and they also still have the number one passing offense as well. So, despite the blunders from last week, this is still a team that can move the chains, and they're going to need to move the chains on the road. And I think it's going to be a lot of Cam Ward again, just kind of making plays, improvising, getting outside of the pocket, finding receivers on the run, or running for first downs. I think you're going to see much more of that against Cal, just based on, it seems like the running games probably won't get going in this one. Miami 38th in rushing offense, Cal 84th in rushing offense, Cal 29th in rushing defense, Miami 21st in rushing defense. So it seems like that's kind of a wash, you could say, when it comes to the running game for both teams. But Miami clearly has the advantage at quarterback. So I think it's really going to come down to Cam Ward making plays, which we've seen from him all season, and Miami getting to Fernando Mendoza and really kind of, putting pressure on him and getting him on the ground for sacks. So if Bain indeed does come back this week, it will be really well welcomed by this Hurricanes football team. So now let's think long term, Donno, because going into this game, there was talk of Miami going undefeated, right? And I think, of course, that's still on the table. They're 5-0, and the schedule not as tough as others for sure. Georgia has a really tough schedule. Florida, really tough schedule. When you compare that to Miami, it doesn't seem as challenging. So, based on what you saw so far, do you think Miami legitimately still can run the table here?
I believe they can. I still circle, and I know that they just lost Saturday, but I watched the game, and they were a few self-inflicted wounds away from potentially winning. Louisville to me is the toughest game on the schedule. I think they've actually outperformed my expectations for them preseason. That's a really fast, physical, well-coached, pretty well quarterbacked team this year with Tyler Shuck, who's got Jeff Brown, the quarterback whisperer, managing things for him. And they were in it against Notre Dame. Obviously the Fighting Irish pulled it off at home like a lot of people expected that they would, but a couple fewer mistakes and it could have been a different game potentially in Louisville's favor. So as the certain games don't look as challenging as we thought they would, like Florida State, but it's still a rivalry game. So I don't rule anybody out in a rivalry. But outside of that, Syracuse looks beatable. Duke is actually 5-0. That Miami should still win that game at home, but Duke looks a lot tougher than we thought they would preseason. Georgia Tech has been a Jekyll and Hyde team this year. Like Miami just needs to play mistake-free football. They should be able to get that revenge win, after what happened last season. So it's like, really, to me, as long as Miami plays well throughout the rest of the year, I think you could still be looking at a 12-0, maybe 11-1 regular season team. But, obviously this is assuming they clean up some of their mistakes, because if they keep missing 20 plus tackles a game like they did against Virginia Tech, you're definitely not going to win every week. So, but yeah, I mean, based on the way that the schedule is playing out, like it's looking like almost a cakewalk the rest of the way, as long as Miami performs to their potential.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far to say cakewalk,
Almost a cakewalk, I said.
Yeah, but I think it comes down to two guys on offense for me: Cam Ward and the X Factor X, Xavier Restrepo. I mean, we saw it on that final drive against Virginia Tech, just how valuable those two players are. Because this Hurricanes team doesn't beat Virginia Tech without those two players on the field healthy. So got to see those guys healthy throughout the season. If that happens, I think Miami has a great chance still to go undefeated and to win the ACC. I think it seems like, Donno, that, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before the show, that Miami needs to win the conference here to get into the playoff, because the ACC, the SEC bias is of course real, and the ACC bias is real as well. As far as it being maybe the fourth best of the Power Four conferences. I mean, when you look at the rankings, Miami only has 3 teams in the top 25, or the conference only has 3 teams in the top 25. So yeah, it feels like Miami almost has to go undefeated, or at least win the ACC. They lose the ACC, they're going to be the bubble team, basically,
Yeah.
as far as trying to get into the playoffs. So every game is going to be crucial for the Canes going forward.
Yeah, and let me say, even though like I feel like there's a path to go 12-0 in the regular season, I will note that if you get to the ACC championship game, Clemson is probably on the other side of that, and
I
they
agree.
look really good. They look really well. What happened to them against Georgia aside, opening week, Clemson's offense has woken up. Cade Klubnik, who obviously was prone to mistakes, he made a really bad mistake against Miami in Miami's overtime win last year, but Klubnik is playing a lot better this year. Clemson has the type of athletes that quite frankly are not. Louisville's close, but you're not going to see athletes like that on any other team you play in the regular season this year. So that would be a very difficult out. And if Miami and Clemson were both to get to the ACC championship game, I would think Clemson, despite the fact Miami's ranked higher because they haven't lost, like I could see the line being very close, or Clemson possibly being favored against Miami in that game, even if both teams run the table from this point out. So It would be difficult. Now, if you were to go hypothetically 12-1 with your only loss being in the ACC championship, I would think you could probably get an at-large bid still. However, if you go 11-1 regular season, lose in the ACC championship game, 2 losses, you're almost certainly out, because the committee's going to want to load up with as many SEC teams and possibly Big Ten in the at-large. And so getting in with 2 losses in the ACC would be almost impossible.
Yeah, so that definitely concerns me going forward, but it's 1-0 mentality, though, right? Donald, that's what we've been hearing from the coaches and the players. So we'll see if they continue their winning streak this week with a big road game at Cal. That's Alex Donno. He's the host of Locked on Canes. Kind enough to join me today on a Monday. Thanks again, Donno, for joining me.
It's my pleasure, Marcus. Thank you so much, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. And you as well. Make sure you also read Donno's piece on canescounty.com after the storm. Also has a mailbag story as well, where you, the fans, can ask questions about the football team. We'll see if that Ruben Bain question is still asked this week, even though Cristobal, outright said it. So, but we'll see how this week goes to see if Bain returns this week. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Also, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Until the next episode.